over there by Car and Valley. So I actually went to Car and Valley and graduated from there. And, you know, I raised my family here. Both of my sons were graduated from Godinez, many years ago. So they're both alumni of your school. So I'm very proud to be a parent and a participant and a community member here in Santa Ana.
Well, that's awesome. Your kids were are alumni.
Yeah.
So yeah. So do you think you could tell us maybe your experience transitioning from Laos to the US?
Oh, yeah. So if you know the history of the Vietnam War, there was a war that was secretly fought in Laos during the Vietnam War from 1965 to 1974. So in fact, if you read a little bit deeper into that history, is we're still is the heaviest bomb country out of that war in during the Vietnam War. So just imagine at that time, Laos population was 3 million, just like the same size as Orange County, the whole country. U.S. in a 9-year expansion of constant dropping bomb in Laos, there were 3.7 million tons of bomb drop in Laos. So some of those bombs are still pretty alive because when you drop a B-52 drop this huge bomblet that spread it to our country. Some of those are still it didn't detonate, so there's still people are still dying from that by or animal or farm animal that stepped on them. So just like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos was also taken over by the communism. So my oldest brother was actually captured and put in re-education camp. And when he escaped in 1979, our family escaped the communists and went into refugee camp for about a year. And then we got the sponsorship to come here because my brother used to work for the American CIA during the Second War in Laos. So we got a direct sponsorship to come here and under the political asylum to be the refugees to the United States. I actually have 2 brothers that are living in France because they can get the sponsorship to come here. And then 1 brother in Australia, and the rest of us are here. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. So so being from Asian descent, how do you think your experience was growing up in the US or Orange County?
Well, just like many other Asian that came after or before us, to be honest, the first time I experienced racism was the first time when we came to the United States. That's when I heard the term gook. So I didn't know what that meant. And I thought that was a term that people called us, because I'm from Laos. Actually, my cousin who arrived, a few months before, and he speak English at the time because we didn't speak any English. He was like, hey, that's not a good word. That's actually a derogatory word towards us, as the refugees. And so then we moved from Oakland to Santa Ana. And of course, growing up in Santa Ana, we hear some derogatory term labeling on us as well. I also get to experience some racism because you live in Santa Ana. Oftentimes you don't get to travel outside of Santa Ana, just like a lot of Santa Ana community member. I remember playing football in high school, and we were supposed to be hosting another team outside of Santa Ana that's supposed to come and play at our field at Valley, and the team forfeited the game, and our coach told us they forfeited the game because they don't want to come down to Valley. They don't want to be in the neighborhood where the Blacks and the Mexicans and the Vietnamese live. And we were like, what? A little confused there. that confusion became reality when we traveled to another school in the South County. When I traveled with the varsity, we were walking from our bus into the locker room before the game, and there was a group of students in the stand. They start chanting the N word at us and calling us name and things like that. And that's when I realized that, hey, we live in, that's how other people may view us outside of Santa Ana. And, you might heard a story today talking about like, Santa Ana's students go to other part of the county and they're being harassed, calling name. That's not new. It's been there. It's been there 30 something years ago when I was in high school, and it's still happening today. As I mentioned, my two boys went to Godinez, and they play water polo for Godinez, and they also play water polo for the club. And when we travel, because water polo honestly is a very white sport, so a lot of schools that have water polo team, they mainly made up of white water polo player, and it's not that big of the world. So we would travel to other part of the county or to other part of Southern California. We were known as a Mexican team, because majority or a majority of us player with the Wahoo, which is the team that we practice at Santa Ana Valley Swimming Pool, were predominantly made of Latinos, so.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Like I was actually part of the football team, and unfortunately I wasn't able to play this year. But I can't just imagine a game being canceled just because of where we came from, thank you. So so the next question is, have you or any other person you are close to have had the experience of a hate incident or hate crime? And I know you touched or you said that your brother spoke when you guys first transitioned into the US, you experienced some hate. So did that maybe like continue on? Was there another experience?
Well, yes. So, to some of us, when today you probably turn on the news, or you may see it on Snapchat or Instagram or other social media stuff platform that show this, Asian hate or stop Asian hate, right? And I do want to clarify that term because, a lot of at the beginning people start talking about like AAPI hate. It's not an AAPI hate, it's a PI population. Many of the Pacific Islanders community don't get to suffer the wave of hate towards Asian American. So that's why we call it Asian hate instead of AAPI hate today. That term changed a little bit because of the data that came in, and I do want to acknowledge there's some of us in the community that identify Asian and Pacific Islander, right? So yes, so the most recent one, someone that close to us that have suffered an attack. For example, our colleague, her dad was attacked in June and of last year, and he just went for his morning walk, and the person just targeted him because of who he is, being an Asian man, walking, his morning walk, and he was an elder person, and the person attacked him and put him in the hospital. So, and we want to think about, and then we'll start seeing things like hate incidents that come into our agency. In typically, because we collected the hate crime and hate incidents report for the county and provide and actually write the report for the county. Typically, the Asian American community we would get about 3 or 4 cases per year of incidences that are reporting to our agency. Now, incidents could be, let me define really quick about the difference between a hate crime and a hate incident, okay? So a hate crime is according to the California state law, it's a crime that that is targeting someone protected class. So it's a criminal act that is committed in whole or in part because of someone protected, characteristic, protected class, like disability, gender, nationality, race or ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or in association with the person or group, right? So what that mean in whole or in part? So if someone's being attacked because they think someone had perceived them to be a part of a LGBTQ community, for example, that is a hate crime. Attack is an assault, right? Now, assault, threat, criminal damage to the property, even murder, right? And then unfortunately, in Orange County, hate crime in general, in the last 5 years, we've seen it all. We've seen it from a verbal threat to all the way to someone being murdered. Blake Bernstein, a young man that came home to visit his family from Penn State, was murdered by his former high school classmate, right? So that's in 2018 as one of the hate crimes that unfortunately we have to respond to. A hate incident is a little bit more frequently experienced by individual or community than a hate crime. But unfortunately, hate incidents, first of all, it's not a crime because it was protected by our First Amendment. So if someone who committed have a behavior, a motivated behavior that is committed against a person, again, through the either actual or perceived identity or protected, characteristic of the thing that I just listed, they'll say things like verbal harassment. Someone send you a message, a text messages, or someone is bullying you online or intimidating you, right? Or even a phone call, or online abuse, or even putting a leaflet, a flyer on your yard. That is not a hate crime. That is a hate incident because it's not escalated to a criminal act statute, because we have a freedom of expression in our country, right? So that being said, if name calling, someone say racial slur against you, that's a hate incident. And unfortunately, for many of us, including myself, racial slur, I've been here 40 years. I mean, I hear it all the time, or racial jokes. And in a way, we're normalizing it. And I shared this with another group of folks the other day that I'm a professional that actually doing this work, about responding to hate crime and hate incidents. And there have been times that I hear, racial slur against me, and I didn't even report it because I just went on my day and tried to live my life, right? So this is one of the challenges, that hate crime and hate incidences are so underreported. And so for me to hear this, like over the weekend, we got a report that a family was being harassed because in their own home, neighbor was calling them name and things like that. And think about this. Our home is the safest place. Well, we would like to say that our home is the safest place to be, right? And all of a sudden, even living in your own home during this lockdown or semi-lockdown today is unsafe. We're suffering from the pandemic and being fearful of the virus, right? Now we're also being fearful of our own neighbor. And it's very hard for the Asian community to go through that right now.
I actually had a question for you. So for hate instances, is there like repercussions for those events, or is there just like nothing that's really done about hate instances in general?
Thank you so much, Jasmine. It's very nice to meet you as well. Unfortunately, hate incidences, oftentimes when people call law enforcement, the priority for them is not as high as if it's a crime. So typical call would be like, I'm sorry it happened to you. There's not much we could do about it because it's protected, right? But for us, we don't want it to consider that way, because the way we take hate incidents is that we're monitoring it, because a hate incident could escalate into a hate crime or hate activity. Does that make sense? So, for example, if someone calling and say, my neighbor had been harassing me, the cop couldn't do anything, we will take that very seriously. And then if the individual or person would like to be connected to resources that make them feel more safe or more comfortable, then we'll do our best to connect that individual, that family, to the resources. And I wanted to also share that this is not just for the Asian hate. We're talking about, we provide this for all types of hate crime and for all community. So I hope that answered your question, Jasmine.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. Because I know so many people, they don't report instances like of hate crimes and hate instances because they don't think much can be done about it. So it's nice to know that at least something can kind of change that. So thank you.
Definitely. I'll give you an example. Years ago, we have, not years ago, even today, I mean, we would get, in Orange County, I want you to think about this, okay? Orange County have, our populations, if you're looking at the demographic of Orange County, African-American only made up about 2% of the county population, okay? So the 20 years that I've been working for our agency, if you look at our hate crime report in the last 20 years, the top 3 targeted demographic in Orange County are African-American, LGBTQ community, and anti-Semitic, which is the Jewish community, right? These are the top 3 that always been targeted. Every now and then there's things that's happening in our community or in outside of a community or in the world or in the United States that change that trend a little bit. For example, 9/11. When 9/11 happened, the Arab and Middle Eastern, or perceived to be, community became the primary target, not just in Orange County, but throughout the United States, right? So when the when the world announced that we have this issue with this coronavirus, COVID-19 coming out of China, and the former administration started using the word like Kung flu or the Chinese virus or things like that, it heightened up the community to be more sensitive to, like, now we have a new target of hate crime and hate incidents, right? And for our agencies to start getting a lot of calls and a lot of report about incidences that people have experienced, and it's kind of relating to COVID-19, but specifically they were targeting Asian American or Asian in our community. And that's when we start seeing tenfold in the reporting. You're right, scapegoating, right? Because start seeing tenfold of the reporting of the, hate incidences. So last year, our raw number, like I said, in 2019, we got about 4 cases. In the 2020, we got 40 cases. So it went 4 to 40. And that's just a raw number. I mean, and we thought it might slow down in 2021. Unfortunately, it hasn't slowed down. Now, those, another one of these, I want to share how the progression of hate crime and hate activity, right? Usually it started out with words, like harassment or name calling, and those words become action, unfortunately. You'll see hate activity, you'll see marches, like in 2017, you see those people marches in Charlottesville, burning torches and bashing the immigrant community or things like that, right? And and those action become violent. We start in 2020. We got a lot of incidents of report about anti-Asian hate incidences. 40 cases of incidences, one hate crime. In 2021 so far, we got at least 5 or 6 hate crime report, and some of those were attacked. A young woman was attacked last month. Was it last month? Yes. No, this month at a skate park in Tustin, and the guy put the young woman in the hospital and fractured her ankle. So now it becomes violence. So we got to be a little bit mindful about how the thing escalate, in terms of hate activity in our community.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So I know so transitioning into your type of work, I know that you said that you were director of operations, and I did a little research, and you also were the coordinator for the response team to hate crimes. So can you first tell us what exactly does the coordinator do?
So we have, so like I said, we're part of a human relations commission, because we were contracted to support the county with the Human Relations Commission's work. So one of the work is to do hate crime prevention and hate crime response. So that role is actually the person who are assigned to work with the community member, with law enforcement, with school. For example, if we get a call from the school and say, hey, we have a hate incident or hate crime that's happening on our campus, how can you help? Our goal is actually to reach out to the community and work with the student, work with the administration or parents, whoever is impacted by that, to provide support. So that is the role for the person. But oftentimes that person's job is to provide hate crime prevention education. So things like what I presented to you, talk about how do you distinguish between a hate crime and a hate incident, and what type of hate crime and hate incident actually occur in our county, right? So we launched a campaign in 2017. It's called No Hate. It's KNOW, but the NO is extracted from that no, right? And the word hate. You got to know it. You got to know what it is, right? You got to understand it. So knowing it, meaning like you got to know the definition, the legal aspect of it, and know what's going on in our community. But also to understand it is to understand how did it impact us as a community, how did it impact, especially our BIPOC community, right? How did it impact the community that this underserved, that we needed to pull together to stand with each other, right? To be with each other. And I say the word be with each other instead of stand with each other is that there's some of us that cannot stand, right? So think about our community that have disability, right? So think about, so now that you know it, understand it, but what can you do to change it? So many times is educating people, and knowledge is power. If we have the knowledge, then we could change our experiences for the better, and that's our hope.
Now, do you think you could tell us some of the approaches and or methods you'd use dealing with people that were involved in these incidents or hate crimes?
Yes. So are you talking about like what can an individual do, or are you talking about like, what do I do when I talk to them?
Yeah, like how do you work with them? Yeah.
Okay. So if I get a call, or my colleague who's doing that job now get the call, the first thing we do is when we reach out to them is, we want to tell them we're sorry that they have to, they're the victim or have been impacted by hate crime or hate incidents. And they're not alone. And we also want to let them know that, unfortunately, hate crime and hate incidents do happen in our county, but it's not the norm, right? We do have a lot of good people in our county. That being said, we're here to support them in any capacity that they may need. No, so if they said, "Hey, what can you do?" Because I was attacked and I lost my wallet during the attack, and I have some money in there, and I don't have medical insurance, for example. We would connect them to a service, an agency that provide victim assistance services, and they could connect with them and support them by paying their medical bills or even reimburse some of that money that they may lost. California actually have a grant that if you are a victim of hate crime and you're working with law enforcement and working victim assistance program, they actually have a small grant that could reimburse some of your money back to you. But most importantly is to provide a moral support, because if someone who's being the victim, not just on hate crime, but victim in general, we're at a very vulnerable stage of our life. We are, first of all, in shock. Psychologically, we're under distress, right? We have high anxiety, and hate crime take that to a whole different level, because this is a two type of level that people are experiencing, right? First of all, they're experiencing the crime. Second, they're experiencing the crime at the very personal level of their own identity. Think about that. Random crime, I'm not saying that random crimes are less easier to handle, but random crime, for example, like people being robbed or being things because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time or whatever it is, right? But then hate crime is actually you being targeted because of who you are. Your sexual orientation, your race, your ethnicity, your age, your gender. Those are the things that you cannot change of who you are, right? So.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. It's hard to think that someone can target somebody just because they don't like them. All right, so do you think you could tell us maybe the positive and negatives of your work? And of course, the negatives being reporting a hate crime incident, but maybe let's focus on more of the positives. What do you think of
Sure.
positives?
Yeah. I rather talk about the positive too. Since you invited me, almost a month ago, and one of the things that I've been very proud of is that, an honor is that to be here is because, the good thing is that when hates happen in our community, people comes together and to let the community know that, hey, we're not going to tolerate this in our own community, right? Unity is powerful. And unfortunately, there have been different groups that have been targeted and being scapegoating, especially, to be quite honest, during the election time, when political candidates go out and spread hate, for lack of a better term, and they do, unfortunately, and they would say things, that, and it's always the same targeted group if you think about it, immigrants, undocumented immigrant, right? And if you think about it, is that in our undocumented world and immigrant world, we're not just from one place. We're from all over the world. Literally, we're all from all over the world. So that being said, sometimes that topic become very specific, and they're targeting certain community. They don't talk about the world in general. They're targeting a certain community. So when those types of things happen, I see a lot of good people come out and they march and they be with each other to support in solidarity. I mean, back in 2017, when Black Lives Matter was marched, I mean, when things was happening back then, I didn't think the world really stopped and think about, hey, you know, we ought to like pay more attention to this issue, right? And when that happened again, and the problem is things continue to happen with police brutality and our BIPOC population becoming, you know, the loss of our life and things like that, you know, higher than our counterpart, which is the folks that have less experience of police brutality, right? And so when George Floyd got murdered, Black Lives Matter marches was like taking it to a whole different level, and more awareness, more, you know, more people begin to understand like, hey, Black life do matter, and we need to pay more attention to this, specifically about Black Lives Matter, right? So that being said, more people, young people like yourself and other folks your age or even younger, begin to verbalize about their own experiences of living in being a BIPOC, you know, one of the BIPOC community member. And we no longer stay in silence. And what that means is that it really gives me a lot of hope that we have to be our own advocate for our own community betterment, you know, like our own futures. I'm 50 something years old, right? So I may have another 25 or less year to be active or to be doing things that you are going to be doing. And the great part is that I see a lot of young people that have gone through our program or have gone through what you are doing in organizing and in being involved. I mean, that's a positive part. We used to do a human relation conference for Orange County, one for junior high and one for high school, and we would bring in about 600-700 students for the junior high one at UCI, and then about 400 or 500 students at Cal State Fullerton to do a summit about human relations. And you know, we would invite different organizations to come and do a presentation to educate youth about all the issues that matter to them, to our young people, right? Issue like teen dating violence, you know, issue like a body image, issue like how to organize your community, you know, issue like, for example, if we would have one today, we would have one that talk about ethnic study. Why is that so important for our community to have ethnic study? So things like that, I do see a lot of hope that young people do draw to this and want to make a difference.
Thank you. So now kind of transitioning into more of Asian hate and the problem. So like you said, Asian hate discrimination has been here for generations, and it's also for people of color. So why do you think these problems continue to exist?
The term I want us to understand is, you know, when we call for solidarity, we also call for unity to white supremacy. And I want to give a primary example, right? Because when you have the media and the society that set up one group to be a model minority, for example, right? And focusing on calling that group to lift them up in a way of their own eyes and saying that if you be like them, then you could be like us. Does that make sense? Then it isolated and start pushing this group. And then, of course, when people get into a distress situation sometime, then certain group become a scapegoating, right? But those types of stereotyping is very harmful. I mean, you know, to say Asian is a model minority, what about the rest of our BIPOC community? You know, we all should be at the same level, right? So we're not like born inherently smarter than other people. We're not the only hardworking community, right? So collectively, we all that. We're all smart. We are hardworking. We are here to live our dream, to build our future for our younger generation, right? And so for that, I mean, we have to take into consideration that we should not be pitted against each other during difficult time. We should pull in and support each other, right? And we also have to be a lot smarter in a way of like, let's not forget that this is a constant effort. I mean, Asia may be targeted today. Who knows who's going to be targeted the next day or tomorrow, right? So let's not forget that when we march with our Black sister and brother in Black Lives Matter and calling for reduction in police in our community and calling for more resources, we didn't forget that. That issue is still here, right? And we still need to fight for that. So those are the things that I felt that, in terms of like the history, Asian American, like Chinese immigrant came to this country back in the like mid 1800s, because California wanted to build railroad, wanted to have agricultural work, wanted to draw the labor to come into the state and the country to do the work, including Orange County. So when the Chinese started coming in, mainly men, Chinese men start coming to work at the railroad track, and they're also being stereotyping like they're going to come here to steal the American job. Now think about this. You might heard of this term before. So then they passed the Exclusion Act, right? The Chinese Exclusion Act, prohibiting Chinese immigrant, right? So then the Chinese were being replaced by the Japanese. So now they're going to recruit the Japanese to come and do the same work or similar work, right? And then, you hear about the internment camp, right? So the recruiter didn't just recruit the Japanese, they also recruited other Asian communities, like the Indian, the Filipinos, and other country in Asian continent and Pacific Islander as well. So then the largest wave of Asian that came into another wave of Asian American that came into Orange County were the refugee from Southeast Asia, in particular Vietnamese, right? So now you have the largest Vietnamese American or Vietnamese living in Orange County, the largest in the world outside of Vietnam. So some of these experiences, well, for us, like for myself and my family, some of these incidents are not new. I mean, some of us that have experiences for me, I've been here 30 something years. I experienced this for 30 something years. I mean, it's not new. Unfortunately, my kid also get to experience it. Now they're a whole new generation. The whole work for all of us is to build a better home and community for our new generation. And then our new generation get to experience it. So that white supremacy system gotta be broken down, gotta stop. So that's why I think we still have some way to go.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you also brought up your son, and one of the questions is that how do you think these incidents affect adults and kids? Like, are they the same or different, or different?
For our young, okay, it depends. I mean, if you're a newer immigrant, newer resident to this community, one of the challenges for us being new is that we have language barriers, right? And so the challenge is that even if you turn on the news, if the news is in English, monolingual English, right? You can't even understand unless you turn the news in your own native language. But many of us don't have that access. So for the elder community, it's a bit tougher, and it is fearful for them. Like, you know, some of the folks that I know in my own family say, "Hey, should I even go to the grocery store? You know, can I go to a grocery store? Because I see this attack on elderly Asian, right?" For the younger generation, like my own children or my own son who are in their 20s, they're pretty well aware, but they also, in a way of like finding a way to be more productive. You know, they wanted to know, what can I do to support? What can I do to make a difference? And what can I do to teach my friend more about this issue? Thank goodness to the technology we have today. They could search and do a lot of their things, right? But even during this pandemic, during this, you know, lockdown or whatever it is, there's still a way to communicate, and they've been doing that. And not saying that they're not angry about it, but they also saddened about it, you know, because it's coming very close to home. I mean, literally, like, you know, I mean, some of us are being attacked at home, like harassed and things like that. So, but they do have you know, on the positive note, they do come out with a little bit more resiliency, right? It's when you get uncomfortable, when you have to adjust, when you have to build. My hope is that moving forward, we become a better and stronger communities, you know, all of us together.
So what are some ways that hate crimes can be prevented and that minorities can be supported, just in general?
That's a great question, Jasmine. So the way to speak up against racism or hate, right? First is that if it's safe to do so, I want you to think about your safety first. Okay, so if it's safe to do so, you could interrupt. You know, you could interrupt the person or the messages. You know, if someone's saying racial jokes, you could interrupt that person and say, "Hey, you know, I don't think that what I hear is okay." You know, or say, "Okay, hold on. Can you go back to what you just called the virus?" Right. So you interrupt that action or the in the flow, right? The other thing you could do is that you could ask questions. You could ask that individual questions, such as, why do you feel that way? You know, what made you say that? Okay, so where do you get that information? This is very, like, sometimes people spill hate because they think they're educating other people, right? So you could ask questions, where you get that information? You know, the other one is to educate. Now, we all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. And so education is power. You know, maybe you could say things like, "I like to share a different perspective," right? Or no, share data, for example. You know, so you could share even your personal experience about, no, the other day I met a man, not the other day, about a month ago, and this man is white and he's in his 60s, I think close to 70 years old. We're talking about the term hate and racism and stuff like that, and he said, "You know, I don't understand it, I don't like it, and I don't think people should make such a big deal about it because I never experienced it." So I told him, "You know, I'm very proud to meet you, to know you, and to hear that you never have to experience it. I think that being your age and you never have to experience it is a blessing, right?" And I'm not saying that he's a bad person, but I'm also sharing with my own personal experiences. You know, the 30-something years I've been here, I don't know how often time I've been called name. I've been asked, where did I come from? I've been told to go back home. So we have a different journey in our life, but I think that having an opportunity to share that with him, give him a whole different perspective. Does that make sense? And in fact, I met him, well, we're in the study group together. So I saw him again last week, and totally one of the powerful things he have said in our last week meeting was, I'm trying to learn to listen for understanding so that I don't judge people. So I think educating is a valuable tool. And last but not least is to also echo, the effort that other people or yourself or your friends have create to embrace diversity and inclusion, right? So if you say someone say, hey, this is a safe space for us to be, to be together, to stand up against, to be upstanding, to stand up against hate or racism or bigotry, right? We need to echo that, because they're even during the difficult time or awkward time, because there might be someone sitting in the room or in the Zoom room that are thinking the same but afraid to speak up. Does that make sense? So I think that's a wonderful question, Jasmine. Thank you so much for that.
So I know that you talked a lot about community, and also it was like an article 2 years ago. I don't know if it's still relevant, but it's you quoted there was a quote that you said that it's important to fight for an inclusive community. And could you talk a little more about that? Like, what does an inclusive community look like, and what does it need?
Yes. So we live in a county that is very, very diverse, right? So, and we also live in a county that is very segregated in a way. If you think about it, in our community in Santana, we don't have a lot of diversity in terms of, like, if you go to school, right? For example, my kid, when they were at Pio Pico Elementary School, they're one of the, because they have, my wife is Latina, so I always call my kid the half. So they're the two boys put together become one Asian kid in the Pio Pico. So, jokingly, that's the way we joke all the time. But that being said, they don't get to experience a lot of diversity, and so when they have the opportunity to be included in something, it really brings a lot of pride for them to be part of. Like, hey, I'm part Mexican and I'm part Laotian, right? And that pride for them is very big, in the sense of, like, I wanted to represent my communities, both world, both the Asian community and the Latino community or Latinx community, and they carry that pride. But fortunately, that's for them. But unfortunately, there's other individual, other community that are not being have that same experience. So when I said building an inclusive community is very important, is because we need to start thinking about, like, what type of community are we building, that who are in our community that are not represented. So if they're not represented, why aren't they represented? And why don't we reach out and bring them and include them? And for example, we're having Zoom meeting, right? We're having this conversation on Zoom. Not everybody have access to it, right? If they're not here, how do we get out there to bring them in? Or how do we reach out to meet them of where they at? At the same time, for example, we say, hey, there's diversity in Santa Ana or in Orange County. Well, if we are going to have a diverse group, for example, we look around, if you say, hey, where are the Cambodians that live in Santa Ana, for example? How do we include them? Well, if they're not here, how do we go find them, right? So that means a diversity and inclusion is like, a diversity, for example, is being invited to the school dance. Everybody's invited. But when you showed up to the dance, no one asked you to dance. That's not inclusion. Inclusion is someone actually asks you to dance, so you won't be standing there by the wall by yourself. Does that make sense? So that's what I meant by that. We gotta provide equal opportunity for everyone, and supporting everyone at the table.
Yeah, I feel like that's so important. And I really like how you talked about that, because I've actually had experiences where the community is only really concerned about the issues and the social injustices that affect us, like our community. And there's so many social injustices that affect, our neighboring communities and just in general, the bigger picture. Because I know about a year ago, we were actually doing a project in choir about social injustices, and it really shocked me how most of my team members didn't really know about the term ableism, which is a discrimination against disabled individuals. And so that shocked me, because I know there isn't a lot of disabled individuals, in our community, and at least my community. So that just kind of really shocked me how they were really educated about certain issues like, discrimination against Latinos, but they weren't as educated in discrimination against disabled individuals. So I feel like that's so important that everybody gets educated about the injustices that don't affect them, but they still affect the bigger community. So thank you for
You're
your
so
statement.
right.
Mhm.
I mean, even when you're talking about resources, right? Because if you're thinking about, in order for us to understand and provide services, it started at the level of even acknowledging and being aware that it exists. Like you said, right? When we're talking about racism or inequality, and we only base it on race and other fact, characteristic, then we skip ableism. Well, think about that. That's a huge issue, because regardless of who you are and where you're from, ableism impacted all community in the world, right? It doesn't matter if I'm Asian or Latinx or African American or Black or European. We have people who are, have experienced that with ableism, have been discriminated against of who they are. I mean, things like learning disability, for example, right? So stigmatized, that's another level about too. It's another, when we're talking about mental health, for example, how huge is it that for us to stigmatize that term, and therefore when we um, don't know much about it and don't know the way to help each other, it really impacting our community.
So, one of our last questions is that what kind of role do you think students can play to push to stop Asian hate or to spread awareness of this problem?
First, I always say this to everyone, especially for our younger people, is that we got to start with ourselves. And I'm guilty of it. I'm still learning it every day. I mean, this is sometimes think about where do we learn how to stereotype other community or even our own self, right? We learned it as young as we were in grade school, right? So by the time you're in high school, it becomes so normalized and it becomes such a part of your life. It's very hard for you to unlearn that. It's very hard for us to unlearn that, right? So I laugh at racial jokes. I laugh at sexist jokes. I laugh at things that's inappropriate. But then it's almost like a constant daily thing for me to remind myself, or I ask my family to remind me, and they do that very good job of it almost every day. So, to unlearn the stuff that is impactful in a negative way to our communities, right? So one of the best way to do is you got to start with yourself, right? You got to start to say, what I learned, what I know, or what I did is not helpful. So therefore, I got to change. So like I said, my two boys growing up in Santa Ana, the reason why they so proud and wanted to teach the folks about who they are is because they get the big pictures. You know, they understand that if I teach people, if I teach my classmates, if I teach my community to love me of who I am, then the possibility they will love people who looks like me, understand people who looks like me, right? Because I know that they have Latino, half Mexican, but they look just like me, you know. So, and they carry the last name Han, so they put them out pretty, sticking out pretty, like a sort of a bow in a china shop, right? So I hope that helped, Robert.
That does, yeah. And so our last question is, would students be able to intern / work for OC Human Relations? Do you guys
Yes,
provide
I would
like, any
hope so. Right now it's a little bit limited because, you know, we're not still, I mean, I'm still at home, as you can see, we are still working at home. And we do have a program, and I please get involved. I mean, we still have a program that we run on Zoom for all Orange County youth. If you know passionate about social justice or human relations, join us. Go check out our website. There's opportunity for youth to be engaged all the time. And because since we do our conference in person, we launch different series of workshops for our young people to be involved. We do one on restorative justice not too long ago. And I know that this summer we're going to have, it's your Theo that helped us start it. This is the Kenyan to youth organizing is teaching our young people to become a community organizer. And so when Rafa was with us, he helped us create some of these great curriculum that we're still teaching our young people today. This summer, we're actually going to have that, I think, via Zoom. So we did it last year and was very successful. This is another opportunity to meet youth that are not just from our community, but from all over Orange County. So we have folks from San Clemente all the way to like Buena Park, Cabrera, and all in between, you know, like coastal area all the way to inland. So you get to meet folks that from a different community, but are like-minded. Does that make sense? Yeah, check us out. I could drop our website on the on chat. Let me do that real quick.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said before, I will be posting this on YouTube, and then I could include on all the links that refer to the information that you gave out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
So sorry everyone for going a little over time, but these problems, they have to be talked about. You know, they can't be ignored because things have to get better in the future. And I can't thank you enough, Don, for joining us and talking about these issues.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This made my day. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Talk to us.
All right. So that being said, do we say goodbye now? For now?
Yeah. Valerie says, thank you so much for everything you have talked about today and all you do for our communities.
Oh, thank you for having me, and have a wonderful afternoon, and hopefully we'll see each other again. And bye for now.
Bye, guys.
Bye.